So why did I write the book? I mean, it's been alluded to. I mean, it's nice to hear people's reflections on the book because I don't really know entirely what I've created. I don't think any artist does, actually. But I wrote it. It was a calling. There's no question about that. I did a little bit of went to a therapist shortly after my brother's death, and I just found in her waiting room, I didn't see any books about the soul journey of someone that's lost a beloved to suicide. And that's incredibly important to me. And so, as the cliche goes, I needed the book, so I wrote it, So that's what happened there. And I feel it's been my redemption. And I think I'm speaking as an act of faith here, but I believe it's been my brother's as well. So I was going to read a passage from the book to sort of illustrate a bit more about why I wrote the book, but I kind of came across a letter that I wrote very shortly after Stephen's death. It was at a writing retreat that I was at with my friends Glynis and Sandy on Vancouver Island, and I was using that as an opportunity to begin the book. And it's quite a bit of what I wrote in that letter ended up in the book, so I want to read that to you. I want to share that with you. It's a letter to Steve. Dear Steve, I'm sitting at a worn green desk in a rustic cabin on the Cowichan River. You would like it here, all the basic amenities but nothing fancy. The kind of place we would have loved going to as kids. A river close by where you can go tubing, a meadow for playing tag, or throwing a ball or frisbee, or throwing a stick for your dog to fetch. Simple cabins for a simple life. I found myself wondering what would have happened if you'd come here to this simple, undemanding community. Maybe you would have found some peace here. Even while you were alive, I would visit places and wonder if they might be right for you, if they would shelter you and enfold you and care for you, not judge you or make demands on you, take you for who you were, a simple guy who liked his coffee and his smokes and a decent newspaper, who didn't mind physical work as long as there wasn't some boss breathing down your neck. A guy who could turn his hand to anything, from building a log house in the middle of the woods to carving birds from cedar, which were getting damn good, especially your corvids. You really seemed to capture the soul of those crows and ravens and magpies. A guy who liked a good read. You never read crap. The well-worn copy of James Joyce's Ulysses in the back of your truck would attest to that. A guy who loved the blues and would give anything to play in a blues band just for the fun of it. A guy who liked a beer and a bit of conversation, a game of Scrabble in the evening, a shot of whiskey or a toke or two to help you sleep, to help relieve that unrelenting pressure to succeed in a world that places no value on guys like you, guys who drive trucks instead of fancy cars, guys who are content with a few simple pleasures, guys whose footprint on the earth is a modest one. It's ironic that the prevailing culture and the media that feed it have no time for your kind, and yet every one of your friends who met you liked you and trusted you and felt comfortable with you right away. You had a way of effortlessly finding a comfortable corner in people's hearts and keeping it for life. People respected you. They've respected your self-reliance and unwillingness to bow to convention. At your memorial service in Saskatoon, I met old friends of yours who'd known you since you were in your 20s, who'd considered you a family even though they rarely saw you. To them, a Steve sighting was a rare and remarkable event. They shared a story about how your health-obsessed roommate dragged you out of bed to participate in a 10-mile race. You had made a drunken promise the night before to enter. Even though you were hungover, never did a day's exercise in your life, and didn't have proper running shoes, you pranced across the finish line in street shoes, cigarette dangling from your lip, and beat him. Maybe feeling like a failure in your 50s with no prospects other than working as low man on a construction site totem pole in the city got to be too much. I know your last job as an independent logger, living alone in the bush for weeks at a time, cutting, hauling, and stacking logs with no one to talk to except your dogs in those endless dark nights became unbearable for you. In the last few years of your life, you were a haunted man, pursued by bad memories, mean thoughts, and dark forces, and far too proud and too stubborn to talk to a doctor or get counseling or whatever. Suffering in silence and seeking solace in substances was preferable. Finding a shoulder to cry on is a non-starter for a middle-aged, red-haired Canadian samurai of Scottish extraction who would far rather commit harikiri than live out the nightmare of a lonely old fart on the street with nothing but a bottle for company. Was that grim prospect what caused you to drive off that country road next to a gravel pit in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan? It was just 8 days shy of your 54th birthday. Was facing that milestone an intolerable prospect? You left no note on that fateful Saturday, May 16th, 2004, but your choice was plain. You didn't want to be rescued. You weren't looking for input from anyone. You had had enough. Growing up together, you were my bright and cocky brother who was more savvy and worldly than me, even though I was 2.5 years older. But somewhere in that critical period in your early 20s, when a guy is expected to make his mark in the world, you saw right away that this was not your game and not your rules, and you didn't want to play. Your hero, Bob Dylan, insisted that the times they are a-changing, and you wanted so badly to believe him. But it wasn't true, or at least they weren't changing in a way that was any help to you. The old order that defined material success as everything still prevailed, and it crushed you and ground you down. And you got the message that you were a failure who would never be good enough. I know that harsh voice well. Many of us do. But for you, it must have been particularly cruel. Perhaps the voice finally got the better of you, or perhaps it was simply your time and your call. Ultimately, it's a mystery. At your memorial service, Mrs. Thomas, the minister who presided, said that death ends a life, but not a relationship. That feels true to me. I don't think our relationship is over, Steve. I know it isn't. In some ways, I feel closer to you now than I did when you were alive. It's as though you have been released from the prison of your earthly body-mind and can finally fly free. You're able to be yourself in a way that was rarely possible while you were with us. And paradoxically, in order to continue being a sister, or whatever it is I am for you now, I need to let you go. I have lived long enough to know that the love stops flowing if you hang on to how you want a person to be, or how you were accustomed to him or her being. I know you are no longer my younger brother, struggling to find his way as a round peg trying to fit into a square hole, the guy who would go left when everyone else went right, the guy who was too impatient with life to allow it to catch up to him. You have become someone else whom I need to get to know all over again, not through physical sensory experience, but more through faith and intuition. To continue our connection, I have to trust in the unknown and become acquainted with the unseen world. I do feel that you've found your place now. You have found peace. I'm not speculating as to the form of your current dwelling place. Whatever it is, knowing you, it'll be unlike any other. At the same time, I don't see how you could help but feel regret about leaving this earth and the gift of life you were given here. You loved it here in many ways. You connected with the natural world more deeply than anyone I know. You had a deep appreciation of music and literature. You loved animals and quite a few humans. You knew how to have a good time, and you loved to laugh. Why wouldn't you have a need to reconcile your loss of us, just as we do of losing you? This book, which is intended to reach others who have lost beloveds to suicide, could be our way of finding reconciliation. Maybe it will help those bereaved by suicide find the courage to explore their loss and to come to terms with it in their own way. And maybe it's a way for you and I to bring meaning and perhaps even beauty to the grim and lonely ending of your life next to that gravel pit in Saskatchewan. Just as I will eventually scatter you the ashes of your body as a way of nurturing new life, in this book, I want to scatter the ashes of our old relationship, wounded though it may have been, in the hope of making room for the new and of offering new life and new hope to others. I love you, Donaleen.